Hello, everyone. I see we have about 85, 84, 85 participants today. So this will be a great time. I'm going to go over quite a bit of information. We'll dive right in and we'll take questions at the end, okay? So let's talk a little bit about diversity within the chiropractic profession. Let me see here. Hold on, my little deal is acting up already. Okay. Are we going to move? There we go. All right. So the outline here, we're going to go over a historic overview of some disparities in healthcare within the nation. We'll talk about the diversity, I guess, scorecard, if you will, of the chiropractic profession. We'll go over some racial disparities within the profession, as well as talk about what is our plan for the next decade. So, for the sake of the presentation today, you'll hear me interchange the use of some terms. You may hear me call the demographic of Black people as Blacks, African Americans. I may call them natives, but it's all the same group of people, just for the sake of simplicity of the actual presentation today. I want to make sure that, we all understand. I may say minorities as well, which is inclusive of all minority populations in the country, not just Black. So there will be a little bit of a difference there, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood that differentiation. As far as the layout of the first part of our talk today, I'm going to go over the historic overviews where I talk about the differences in, I went the wrong way. I talk about some differences within timelines. So we'll go over a little bit of history here, and we'll talk about the Egyptian dynasty to the Republican era, which covers 2980 BC through the 1800s of AD. Then we'll go into the expansion era from 1800s to the 1900s and move into the civil rights era through today, the 1900s through the 2020s. So first, we'll cover the Egyptian dynasty. And again, I said this covers 2980 BC through the 1800s AD. It's the third dynasty, is the dynasty I'm going to focus on really briefly here. And the only reason I am able to do this is because it's one of the oldest records on books that we can actually review when we talk about the history of healthcare in the Egyptian, society. So health in the Egyptian dynasty is revered to Imhotep, who was a Black physician. He influenced Greek medicine and also was a very influential person to the Hippocratic school. Many hieroglyphics that are found in the temples today that is still in Egypt honor Imhotep and show some of his medical devices that were used back in his day. You can kind of see in this relief here, there are some surgical tools there. I mean, I can pick out quite a bit, the few things that we actually use today. But Imhotep was said to have developed systematic practices for diagnosing and curing a variety of common ailments, as well as all things like tuberculosis, appendicitis, arthritis, and gout. He's said to have discovered how blood flows through the body, and he developed sophisticated surgical techniques that some still are used today. Perhaps most notable, however, was Imhotep's system of treating diseases. He was a priest in the Egyptian religion, but his medical practices do not seem to have relied on magic or any type of ritualistic practice. Instead, he may have been the first physician of Egypt to develop systematic uses of ground plants and other natural substances to create what we truly identify today as medicine. Life expectancy in ancient Egypt and Nubia was lower than in many modern populations. While some ancient Egyptians undoubtedly enjoyed longevity, most were unlikely to live beyond about 40 years of age. This may seem young by today's standards, but it is important to view age within the context of, a particular society. Thus, today, people are shocked at the death, like King Tutankhamun, which is a very famous Egyptian king. He died at about the age of, I want to say he died at the age of 18, but in society, he was already mature in terms of kingly responsibilities. So after the fall of Egypt, the slave trade began in the 16th century. Slavery was over 70 years old by the time the Declaration of Independence was signed, which was done in 1776. course, we know the famous line in our Constitution, "We the people," all men are created equal. However, at this time, doctors categorized Blacks as subhuman, thus justifying slavery. Little scientific medical progress had been made during the 16th century. Religious wars were fought and accompanied by the Atlantic slave trade that supplied an estimated 40 to 100 million souls through the Middle Passage into the Caribbean and the Americas. Many never even made it to land, and the slaves were introduced to massive overwork, poor food, poor hygiene, inadequate sanitation, and overexposure to the elements. Treatments were only rendered upon force, and the development of racial inferiority at the hands of the medical field were well underway. During the 18th century, commercial agriculture of cash crops for export were the focus of work for Black American slaves. The obvious slave health deficit was a result of both the overwork and poor living conditions that they endured. The medical education system changed at this time to require patient material. I say it again, patient material, which ushered in another practice of using Blacks or the Black slave as training and experimental subjects. These practices further drove home the idea of racial inferiority, a simple convenience based on doctor needs instead of patient needs. So in massive proportion, there were poorhouses, orphanages, and asylums that evolved into hospitals where acts of exploitation, immorality, and indifference were practiced. Moving into the expansion era, which covers the 1800s through the 1900s, we'll talk about most obvious that there was doctors of the time that did not follow ethical codes as they related to Blacks and the poor. Black physicians began to emerge, but to little effect on the overall status of healthcare for Blacks during that time. In fact, the number of deaths for Blacks was so staggering that New York Life and Equitable actuaries, they predicted that Black people would be extinct by the year 2000 AD. And this was cited back in 1850 when the life expectancy of male slaves was only 22 years old. And the high instance of miscarriages due to the strenuous slave labor caused a low birth rate. So the American Medical Association, the AMA, of course, was established in 1847, and it gained control over the medical educational system and professional societies in healthcare. Despite Black physicians' protests and demonstrations, segregation was standard in the medical profession, and it was also its official national policy until 1968. Miraculously, a small portion, only about 2% of the nation's doctors were Black by 1900. In the year 1908, at the request of the AMA, Abraham Flexner observed 155 medical schools where he reinforced segregation and unequal medical education for African Americans. The report recommended closing all but 2 of the Black medical colleges that were in operation, and that's Meharry and Howard. Those 2 schools were responsible for training over 90% of all African American physicians in America. But in 1950, there were 133 Blacks to receive an MD degree. That's 133 people amongst 2 schools. So as you can see with the table here, there are 12 Black medical colleges, or there were 12 Black medical colleges between the years 1865 and 1920, with only the top 3 that you see on the list really still remaining. Lincoln University is still open. I just don't believe they have a medical program any longer. So medical training required patient material. What exactly does that mean? That means they were used for medical education as the experimental subjects. Mostly the women and children were used for these purposes. A doctor by the name of James Marion Sims was accredited as being the father of modern gynecology. His research was conducted on enslaved Black women without any anesthesia to invent the vaginal speculum. Surgical techniques were also his thing. He was trying to actually create a surgery to repair vaginal fistulas, which is a common complication of childbirth during, that causes untimely pain and urine leakage. Sims' decision for not using anesthesia was misguided by the belief that Black people didn't experience pain like others did. These experiments were not done necessarily at the consent of the patient. Rather, it was given by her owner, who had a strong financial interest in her recovery. It took 30 unsuccessful tries for Sims to repair a fistula successfully. His first successful one was done on a 17-year-old patient. Her name was Anarcha. She had suffered a very traumatic birthing experience, but it was only then thereafter that Dr. Sims began to practice on white women. So moving into the civil rights era, which is current day, or civil rights to current day, the 1900s to 2020, the philosophy of eugenics aims to improve and work with the human race by, taking society and controlling reproduction by the people or populations that only have desirable traits and discouraging reproduction by people with undesirable qualities. So with the pioneering of abortion clinics throughout the nation by well-known eugenicist Margaret Sanger, publications that she contributed to called Birth Control Review in May of 1990, she proclaimed, quote, "More children for the fit, less for the unfit," close quote. By unfit, Sanger meant the mentally retarded or physically handicapped, but later her definition expanded. Francis Galton would develop this theory by collecting biographical information from obituaries and other sources to build a pedigree of leading English, with the conclusion that superior intelligence and abilities were inherited with an efficiency of about 20%. He played into the Darwin theory of survival of the fittest, and he theorized that humanity could be improved by encouraging the fittest members of society to have more children. Eugenics was doomed from the beginning, though, as the pedigree characteristics targeted and defined traits as criminal that include epilepsy, things like bipolar disorder, alcoholism, and then feeble-mindedness, which is considered varying degrees of mental retardation. These, among others, could be found in almost any member of any family and could be categorized in such a way to make the data fit. Unfortunately, the Black population and the poor population were among most those who were targeted and treated with forced sterilization. In 1927, in fact, the United States Supreme Court decided to uphold a state's right to forcibly sterilize a person considered unfit to procreate. The trial was called Buck versus Bell. Based on that one case, Buck versus Bell, 70,000 Americans were sterilized as a result. For men, they underwent vasectomies. For women, it was a salpingectomy. Also, there were countless numbers of people who were actually deemed feeble-minded and kept in eugenics camps or colonies rather than being allowed to live in freedom. The Great Depression ushered in and World War II struck in the late 1920s, bringing the rise of death due to pellagra and epidemic diseases. Segregation, poverty, and discrimination by doctors kept Black patients out of the mainstream medical systems. With the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1965, Medicare and Medicaid legislation with the intention to open health systems to Blacks, the indigent and handicapped, and the elderly and poor were all implemented. According to the Journal of the National Medical Association, this led to improvements in the Black health status for about 10 years. Then it plateaued off about 1975 and actually has been downhill since about 1980. The works of Booker T. Washington in the late 1800s highlighted his dream of Black economic development, and he was widely supported by Northern philanthropists who funded educational experiments to back him. He died in 1915, but the steady decline in health initiatives started to gain attention again, with syphilis being the major problem that was happening at that time. About 35% of the population in reproductive age was observed to have contracted syphilis. In 1932, the Tuskegee Institute, along with the Public Health Service, began to study the natural history of syphilis in hopes of justifying treatment programs for Blacks. The study included 600 Black men. 399 of them had syphilis and the rest did not. Initially, it was planned to be a 6-month study, and it lasted for 40 years. Even after the development of the treatment for syphilis, which we know to be penicillin, that was founded in 1947, none of the men in the study were ever treated. They were told that they were being treated for bad blood, and in exchange for their participation in the study, they would receive medical exams, free meals, and burial insurance. These patients were never given the benefit of patients' informed consent, and they were never offered a choice of discontinuing the study, even though there was a new highly effective treatment that was widely known. A $10 million class action lawsuit was filed by the families of the study's participants in 1974, and there were some survivors, their children, their wives, widows, and offspring, that were all granted lifetime medical benefits and burial services. The last study participant died in 2004. There are currently 11 offspring that are still living today who are receiving the benefits from that class action lawsuit. So you asked the question, what keeps Black Americans from seeking medical assistance? Well, there's no question. Denied medical treatments for often resulting in death from hard manual labor and unethical medical experiments on women building the practice of gynecology, medical studies that offer botched treatments like the Tuskegee syphilis study, eugenics leading to forced sterilizations and the pro-abortion movement. Do you still give question to why Black people in America err on the side of caution when considering medical treatment? The contemporary fear is mistrust Black people have towards medicine, and the beginnings of their legitimate discontent derives from the fact that white medical educators and researchers rely greatly on the availability of African American patients for dissection, surgery, and bedside demonstrations. This is one origin of negative racial attitudes within the health professions. It's in fact, the patients prefer to, choose a physician that best represents their community, their culture. So the lack of Black MDs and DCs also plays a major role in these negative attitudes, even when we look today at the current numbers for COVID. This came out in August 18th of 2020, which clearly shows the offset of higher cases of COVID in the African American community, as well as the higher cases of hospitalizations and deaths. Speaking of COVID, I mean, we just, seem to be suffering at a higher rate that's much more prevalent than all other races within the country. Most families have someone who has a story of medical malfeasance, and these stories are told from generation to generation that causes subconsciously programmed fear of the white coat. In fact, that's a real thing. We all know the white coat hypertension. This is a phenomenon in which people exhibit high blood pressure levels above normal range within a clinical setting, although they don't have it in other settings. No doctors are exempt from this fear. Absolutely not, even chiropractors. This is what I pulled from the National Institute of Healthcare Management Foundation. They too found similar numbers with reference to COVID. They show, of course, in their calculations, and I want to say they pulled their records also from the CDC at that time. You can see this is from August 17th of this year. 22% related deaths in the African American community, although Black America is only, conclusive of 13% of the total population. Some of the risk factors that they've found for the increase in these numbers is overrepresentation in the front line in essential worker roles, unequal health insurance access, hyper-segregated housing, food insecurities, housing insecurities, wealth education, and mass incarceration. The list can go on and on, but while we're on this topic, let's discuss a little bit about what it looks like as far as a number amongst Black, or the number of Blacks in the United States, and where we have a larger percentage of Black communities or counties by looking at a map. This is an active map, and it shows us the Black population in our nation in each county from the year 1900 or 1990 to 2017. You can see the trend in the number of counties that account for more than 20% of the population as being painted Black on the map. You see now it covers the majority of the southeastern region of the nation. You do show a little bit of some disparity on the other side, on the West Coast in California, but I want you to take mental note of the southeastern region of our country. That's where the majority of counties that house more than 20% or more percentage of the population is being Black. Here's another map. It's a map from the Pew Research Center's analysis of the 2000 census and the 2018 Census Bureau's population estimates. You can see where there are counties where one racial or ethnic group other than whites accounts for more than 50% of the population. Again, the South and the Southwest, Southeast and the Southwest a little bit of the actual United States holds most of the counties where Hispanics, Blacks, or indigenous people make up the majority of the residents. These counties represent just 5% of the 3,142 counties in the United States and about half of the country's 293 majority non-white counties. You see the overlapping of maps there and how there is a trend that we're going to pretty much form. So the average number of DCs per 1,000 beneficiaries for Medicare ranged from 0.9 in Mississippi to 5.6 in South Dakota, and these numbers are from 2007. So if you see figure 1 over here, it illustrates variation by state in quintiles of, chiropractic physicians per 1,000 beneficiaries for Medicare for 2007. Chiropractic availability to the Medicare beneficiary population was highest in the North and the West, with a large block of greater availability in the Northern Plains and mountain states, and the lowest in the South and in Hawaii. So when we talk about users of those benefits for Medicare in 2007, and you look at the number of beneficiaries, 1,000 beneficiaries range from 7 in the District of Columbia to 204 in South Dakota. So figure 2 is going to show you by state the number of actual users of the beneficiaries, which were highly concentrated in the northern and western United States, with a large block of higher use in the Northern Plains and prairie states. States with the lowest rates of use were in the Southeast, the Southern, New England, and Hawaii. So if you have noticed all of the maps that I've showed you, there seems to be a trend where there are many potential chiropractic patients. You see a very small number of chiropractors to provide the services, and it just kind of flows through with the trends that we see within the profession. So this here is an actual paper that was written in 2016 by Leonard Vernon, Dr. Vernon, and he talks about diversity in chiropractic in this paper, and I thought it was a very good paper. Chiropractic's continued legacy of racism and its effect on minority populations and utilization. And just paraphrasing the abstract here, he says the failure of the chiropractic profession to reach out to this greatly underserved population may rest in the first that graduated chiropractors choose not to practice in areas that are heavily populated by minorities because of economic decisions, and a decision that is not isolated to chiropractic. For a profession that is so inextricably linked to African Americans, the profession has historically failed to reach out to this population, both for the health benefits chiropractic might offer them, as well as for student recruitment. A lack of African American mentors appears to be one reason. And then he finally goes into the end of his abstract by saying the profession is, and its relationship with the African American, has been and remains poor. It's been estimated that over 40% of the US population reports using complementary alternative medicine professions like chiropractic. However, the same proportion does not utilize chiropractic services. According to McKinsey et al., the prevalence of chiropractic use for whites was 13%, whereas for Blacks, it was only 5%, Hispanics 9%, and Asian population 5%, with Native Americans also at 9%. A diverse chiropractic workforce has the potential to improve the health of the public, especially if our workforce is representative of the population. According to the ACA, there are more than 70,000 chiropractors in the United States. I actually believe the number is closer to 77,000 right now. But we'll just say over 70,000 in the United States right now. Roughly another 3,000 chiropractors work in academic and management roles. And there are approximately 10,000 chiropractic students in circulation amongst 18 nationally accredited educational programs throughout the United States currently. 2,500 chiropractors enter the workforce every year. And according to the Journal of Chiropractic Education, less than 1% of the nation's chiropractors are Black. While only around 4% of all MDs are Black, it's estimated that by 2050, according to this article, 15% of the total population will be Black, which will drastically increase the need for increased number of sought-out chiropractors in those communities. So we see in graph A, it shows the DCs back in 2012. You see there was less than 1% at that time. We've actually surpassed 1%, thank God, at this point. But it's still such a tiny, tiny number. And you can see where we fare amongst other nationalities within the profession. The trend really trickles down from the MD role. And you can see there in 2012, the number for MDs, Black MDs was 3.5% versus the other populations that you see there. So the comparison of overall percentages of races of practicing DCs from the ABCE, they have some data that they show to the current population of the United States shows that there is an over-representation of white practitioners and a deficit of practitioners in all other reported races. The greatest negative deficit is of DCs from higher populations in the United States is for Blacks, followed by Hispanics, Asians, and then Native Americans. So according to the 2010 census, the racial diversity of the US population made up 72.4% of whites in the population, 12.6% Blacks, 6.2% Hispanics, and 5% Asian, with less than 1% of Native Americans. These percentages are expected to change drastically by 2050, when it is predicted that racial minorities will account for more than the half of the population. A diverse chiropractic workforce has the potential to improve the health of the public. For example, it's been suggested that women and racial minority healthcare providers are more likely to provide care in underserved communities and to minority populations. So let's talk a little bit about what I call the vicious cycle. So this cycle can really be interchanged in any part. There are 5 components which are not by all means the total pieces of the cycle. But these are 5 parts that I felt were very important to shed light upon in order to tackle the issue of low numbers of minorities within the profession. So we can really pick up any one of these pieces and begin to dissect the problem and to walk our way through a resolution to the issue that we're having. But for the sake of the presentation, I will talk about recruitment first. Again, you can pick any one of these problems first and go from there. I'm just going to pick one and go with it. So if we know that recruitment of minorities for our future DC programs or future DC students is low, of course we'll have low minority students in these programs, a low number of minority students in these programs. And in order to, change the number of DC educators that are minorities, you would want to change the number of minority students. So then you go backwards and change how you recruit, if that makes sense. And if you don't have a great number of minority DC educators, then of course you won't have DC speakers that are minorities, and you won't have a lot in practice that are minorities as well. And the cycle continues. So if we go back and say, let's change or improve our recruitment efforts for both minority students and educators in the urban core, we can increase the number of minority students in the seats, create more scholarships, maybe make things a little bit more enticing and reality based for minority students. Sometimes they don't even know what chiropractic is, because of course, if we go back to the other end of the cycle, there's not a lot of minority chiropractors that are in practice, and they're not speaking at events, so they're not in front of people, and no one really knows that they exist. But if we were to increase the number of these students that graduate and promote the idea of them returning back into the programs from which they graduated in order to teach, then we'll increase the number of educators, which could help retain those minority students. Because I will tell you, just from experience, you know, it doesn't feel great to be the oddball out, and especially not see anyone of a leadership role in the profession in which you seek. As far as minority speakers are concerned, if we graduate more minority DCs, there are more educators that are minorities within the profession. Of course, then we will have more qualified minority speakers, and that's who you will begin to see at certain points of, you know, your chiropractic career as you participate in some of these large events that, you know, put up a lot of speakers on the main stage. And then finally, more minority DCs will be into practice and helping those numbers offset those numbers we saw on those maps that I showed. But of course, in order to offset that and get minority graduates into practice a lot quicker, we will need to provide postgraduate programs and trainings and board reviews to help them get up and running a lot quicker. So when we talk about the plan for 2030, we look at some of the goals in that vicious cycle that we'd like to see. And a few of them, the main thing, of course, is to increase minority enrollment in DC programs. Now, I threw out 10% here, but by all means, I would love to see it like be increased exponentially. I just said 10% as a great rule of thumb. Is just a good goal to have, and it's realistically attainable. But if we improve those recruitment efforts through partnership with minority organizations in the profession and increase minority representation through speaking and teaching engagements, I really believe we can annihilate a 10% enrollment improvement for minority DC students. And then significantly, we need to increase the number of new DCs entering into practice in less than 1 year of their postgraduate studies. You know, and I speak from the ABCA and understanding and knowing that one of the main issues we see is that our students are not graduating in these programs having completed their boards. I'm not sure what can be done to push the idea that we maybe can, I don't know, implement boards in a different manner that puts these new graduates done with their board, you know, as having finished their boards by the time they graduate. But if we promote participation in some of our research that confirms the effectiveness of our DC curricula, we can best prepare these DCs for practice. And as you know, any organization, you can always promote postgraduate memberships for state board associations as well as professional associations. According to the findings of the study titled Diversity in the Chiropractic Profession, Preparing for 2050, it was published in 2012, of course, in the Journal of Chiropractic Education. It stated the current racial diversities of chiropractic student bodies in the United States is not enough to reach projected 2050 US population distributions. In that case, actions are imperative to increase the number of DC students and graduates ready to practice in the next 10 years. Without that key component, we run into the issue of literally just not having a lot of doctors to treat that population that we know is surely to come, with an increase from 12.6%, I think it was, of African Americans in the population in the United States, up to the 15% that we believe is happening. And then overall minorities is you know, projected to be right at 50% of the population collectively. So where does the ABCA fit in all of this? Well, we strive to raise our membership exponentially in the next 24 months, and we have a mentorship program that focuses attention on new graduates with the goal of entering into practice within the first 6 months of graduating. The quicker we can get our members into practice, the more members of urban communities will be more open to obtaining chiropractic care. Our leadership efforts include the promotion and sponsorship of minority speakers, teachers, clinicians, and administrative board roles. Recruitment of both new DCs and DCs in the field is a vital piece to increase the number of Black and minority chiropractors overall. The ABCA seeks to partner with all colleges in these efforts, and a plan to fully fund our Harvey Lillard Scholarship Endowment is being drafted with the goal to provide more annual scholarships to help offset some of the cost of these DC programs. Talks of research to collect clinical demographics within diverse clinics in the country are underway and aimed at providing both chiropractic schools and the MBCE with information confirming patient needs. This information can be used to better determine if DCs are trained to provide the actual needs of patients in those underserved communities. Some of the information will be used to assess DC curricula across the board at our educational institutions across the nation. So just some quick facts about the ABCA for those who did not know. Our organization was founded 40 years ago in St. Louis by Dr. Bobby Westbrooks. Currently today we have about 250 active members, which makes up less than 1% of the 1% of Black chiropractors in the United States. That is horrible, but that's our reality right now. Our mission is to integrate and improve outcomes for people of color entering the profession of chiropractic. So we are not exclusive. If you resonate with our mission of integrating and improving outcomes for people of color entering the profession of chiropractic, by all means, and you're a chiropractor, you can definitely join the ABCA. So we do have 7 purposes of initiatives that are listed on our website. But again, as I described before, we're focusing on 4 initiatives of mentorship, leadership, scholarship, and research. When people ask, well, what can I do if I'm just a practicing DC and I typically, am just going about my day trying to do my thing in my community, how can I help? Well, if you're a part of any professional organization, we most definitely suggest that you, diversify your speakers or seek out speakers that you can utilize that are minorities in your area. If you don't have anywhere to particularly seek out those speakers, utilize the ABCA. We have created a speakers portfolio where we have well over a dozen qualified speakers that have a gamut of specializations within the profession. They all have the degrees in chiropractic, and some of them have ventured into other avenues of practice or not necessarily practice. We also have those that links to those that specialize in billing, coding, whatever it is that you would need. Please always reach out to ask. You can always create your own scholarships for minorities entering into an accredited DC program. Of course, we have some state organizations or associations that are doing this, and the ABCA always likes to partner with those associations to create a platform, if you will, a larger reach to the population through our list of contacts throughout the nation for awarding those scholarships. And we also invite any organization to come and be a part of our national convention in order to award those scholarships and to make sure that there's a huge showing of minorities at the time when those potential students receive these scholarships. Again, the research piece is so big. It's such a vital piece to not only, the diversity piece of our profession, but the profession as a whole. It was very disheartening for me to, look up and realize that we're in the middle of a pandemic and we could not literally say, go get an adjustment. It helps, boost your immunity. Everyone had a heart attack about that statement because we did not have any research that truly backed what it is that we wanted to convey. So research is such a big thing. And I would like to, push everyone individually and those in leadership in their organizations to always support the idea of research, funding, funding research projects, not only in, diversity that will help the profession to go into the next level of the playing field, but definitely to help keep the profession a gold standard and an honest thing for whatever it is that we are trying to accomplish in those communities that we serve. And then always, again, if you want to join us and join the talks about diversity and inclusion within the profession, you can always partner with us and come to our national convention this year or next year, in 2021, we'll be at Hayward, in Hayward, California. Our partner is Life West, but we are inviting all of those who are interested in continuing the conversation around diversity within the profession and create somewhat of a conversation, a think tank, if you will, amongst leaders so that we can make a determination on what's the best practice that we could use to raise the profession and become a gold standard in the healthcare field, where we treat everybody and not just a core few that does not include all populations or cultures within the nation. Of course, you can contact the ABCA on our website there, abcachiro.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at ABCA Chiro, or Twitter is ABCA _ Chiro. And you can always email us with any questions that you have at info@abcachiro.com. So this is the point in the talk. I think I was a little fast, but I have a feeling we have some questions to turn this into a good conversation. I'd like to turn it back over to you guys to see if we can get some questions answered. Is Arash still there, or Kaylee?
I'm here. You do, well, first, just a few, thank you for covering this important topic from Dr. Perlman. And a lot of other compliments on this presentation from our doctors watching. The first question is from Dr. Rob Russell. Currently, are there outreach and scholarship opportunities to attract Black students to chiropractic colleges?
Right now, all I know of are the 3 scholarships that the ABCA awards every year, but they are not for potential students. They are for current DC students. The only scholarship for minorities that I know that's out there for potential DC students, I believe, is from the state of Ohio. The Ohio State Association has its own scholarship. And then Life West just announced a couple of weeks ago that they have fully funded a $100,000 endowment. I want to say that's probably a $10,000 scholarship annually for minorities entering into the profession. So that's a brand new one. The ABCA, as I stated in the presentation, is currently working to create its same endowment. We talked about $100,000, but I'm not sure what it will be at this point. But we're going to have the same amount, if not better, for minority students that are entering into the profession as well. So we'll offer both for potential students and current students.
Perfect. That's great information. This was a follow-up. Dr. Rob Russell asked, I understand that Harvey Lillard wanted to attend chiropractic college but was denied admission. His race was reportedly the reason for his inability to gain admission. Does the ABCA have any information to confirm or deny this?
Yes, we have done a lot of research on Harvey Lillard, and we've done some digging around, as well as some other organizations. I think there is a club or group for the history of chiropractic, and they were actually doing some research too. But this just came up in the Diversity and Inclusion Summit, the second installment of it that was put on by Life West just the other day, yesterday actually. My days are going so fast I don't remember when. However, we talked about creating a true story, telling the true story of Harvey Lillard. He was not, in fact, just a janitor. He owned a janitorial company, and of course, at the time when chiropractic was founded or discovered, he actually was not allowed to be enrolled into a chiropractic college, because at that time they were completely, segregated educational services that were not offered to Blacks. So that is a true story, a true part of his story, and we most definitely are working to put the true factual piece of the story together so that we can present from the ABCA. And as well, I think we're going to, couple together with our friends at Life West to do it, but we are going to try and most definitely publish the correct story for Harvey Lillard.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Leslie Hewitt asked, in addition to mentorship and increased awareness, how can we all support more diversity in chiropractic?
I think for just a general practicing doctor that's not affiliated with an association or a state association or just one of our professional groups within the profession, I think it's very important to host events, learning events for the population in the urban core. They just don't see a lot of us chiropractors, Black chiropractors or minority chiropractors, or even chiropractors in general, come and teach about chiropractic. I think a lot of people just don't know or understand what it is that we do. And so awareness only comes when we are educating the population. So I believe as individual chiropractors, if we all committed to, going and doing some community service in the urban core by talking, having chiropractic talks, or going to high schools and most definitely trying to be a part of career days, or, there are so many things that can be done very simply. Just, being visible in communities in the urban core, I think is a very big piece. And then, of course, you can always link up with some organizations that actually could filter in some young chiropractors that may want to come and learn, what it is that you do in your clinic, so that they'll be better prepared when they become graduates in the field and practicing. So we always say, the mentorship piece is big. There are schools now that have preceptorships that allow students that are already in the seats at chiropractic colleges to come and work with you before they actually graduate. I think Logan is one of the schools that actually has a program now where it includes the 9th trimester clinical student or intern to actually participate. And so they've reached out to the ABCA. And so if you have one of these diverse clinics, if you're a diverse chiropractor and you want to, help in that mentoring of young chiropractors, then by all means contact the ABCA or contact Logan directly to see how you can become a preceptor doctor for minority doctors that are looking to graduate soon.
Dr. Leslie Hewitt added a part B, and I know you've touched on scholarships, but I think she's maybe looking more, not the chiropractic colleges, but other outside sources of the Black community to inspire them to go to chiropractic college. Like, what are the sources?
Yeah, so the scholarships that we're talking about fully funding the new endowment for, it will be a scholarship that like we said, we'll open it up to potential students. But the recruitment piece that the ABCA is currently working on, and I also, by all means suggest that anyone could be a part of this as well, even just by contacting their alma maters. But the recruitment piece that the ABCA does, every year we have the Harvey Lillard Scholarship, that it's a banquet at the end of our national convention. And so that's where we give out all of our awards and scholarships for the year. But at all costs, what we try to do is write into our national convention agenda an event for whichever community encompasses the area in which we have our national convention. And we bring in some of those community events or community organizations that always includes young people. Sometimes it's children that are from the ages of, 10 to 12, and then sometimes they're high schoolers, and then sometimes they're undergraduate students. So let's just say, for example, we have our convention in Kansas City, and we have Lincoln University, which is within an hour and a half drive from Kansas City. We would then work with the admissions office at Cleveland to reach out to Lincoln University, which is a historically Black college, and invite any interested students that are in an undergraduate program there, perhaps in their life sciences or their biology or kinesiology, whichever one of their undergraduate programs that best matches the career path to chiropractic. We would then invite them to come and be a part of our national convention, where we will put on an event for them that would expose them to chiropractic, to what it is, what we do, and they would be surrounded with minority students and doctors in the field. They can ask, uncharted questions and get all of the information that they need. And at that time, if they truly are interested, they can apply for these scholarships and potentially enter into a program as soon as they're done with their undergraduate studies. So there's a couple of things that are going on, but the ABCA absolutely works with each college. We want to work with each college. We have an open door that we are trying to, create these programs and be the bridge that gaps to the organizations within the communities with the schools, so that they can always have a cycle of minority students and potential students filtering through certain programs in these schools, so that they learn about the profession and learn about the opportunity to enroll once they are eligible.
Perfect. Dr. Leslie Hewitt said, thank you so much. That was super relevant and terrific presentation, and she appreciates your answers. You have
awesome. Thank you.
coming in. Dr. Tracy
Okay.
Cole, has the ABCA looked at trying to place Black chiropractors in community health centers to provide an opportunity in urban centers for the minority population to become more familiar with our profession?
We have not done that, but that is an awesome, awesome idea, and I will take note of that. The only thing that we have become a, I guess you can say, potential participant in are referrals for veterans. So we do have a few veterans in our organization who are chiropractors, and it's odd, both of them are out of St. Louis. And so when we get those requests, we always filter things to them, and they do certain events for at the VA's offices. But no one, I mean, honestly, the numbers are so small for Black chiropractors in communities. I will be quite honest with you and tell you, we literally are in our communities working very, very, like our faces are stuck in the grind. Like we literally have, our plates full, which is why it's such a big deal to recruit more potential students so that we can have more minority DCs that are available. The problem is that we just are so busy because, again, we represent less than 1% of the population, and we're treating all of those minorities of the population in the United States that we can possibly treat. And so a lot of us are not able to filter into different avenues because a lot of people, of course, want to focus on practice. So that is a good takeaway, though. I most definitely will make note of that so that we could look into that, getting minority chiropractors into, some of the public healthcare facilities and, make a difference. Thank you for that.
Dr. Tracy Cole's on our board too, so if you need to connect with him, it's very easy.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, so Dr. Joe Capon says, what can or needs to be done to help African American students complete national and state boards earlier or more timely?
That's the $1 million question. I think personally, now this is just me talking. This is not a discussion that I've had with my board of directors or anyone else for that matter, but I think that we probably should implement the boards as a part of the curriculum in our DC programs nationwide. That's just my opinion. And I think if we did that, it most definitely would take a little bit of that tinge of stress off of a student that is trying to do boards on top of I got finals, on top of I got to treat patients, on top of I got to do this or that. And it would kind of help them focus because they would know a timeline on when they need to take these boards and how better to prepare if our curricula are actually, stacked according to the way that we take tests in national boards. I think that would help. But right now, since that's not an option, the only thing that I can see helping people to get their boards passed quicker is to most definitely it's twofold. Number one of the problems is money, right? A lot of the students graduate and maybe they spent their, overages of their student loan money, or they just, they have families. They have to work and figure things out. So maybe scholarships for board exams, I'm not sure, could be something that would be, that's a smaller scholarship, but definitely organizations can offer them. And the second piece is I think every organization must take a responsibility to provide some type of board review, benefit to membership for new doctors, so that in case they can't afford to take both a board review and pay for boards, let them pay for the boards and they can get the board review through their membership to one of these associations. Of course, membership to associations a lot of times are a lot less than paying for a board review or paying for your national board. So I think the ABCA's idea of creating a board review for our members as a benefit is something that is going to have a different impact in the near future. We've just started it. We haven't even had our first course yet, but we are putting it together, working with the NBCE. We've got some of the data from the NBCE to try and figure out what areas of the boards are most definitely the harder parts that people are having a hard time with. So I would say as an organization or as a leader in the profession, most definitely utilize any resources you have to provide some help for your members or provide a benefit for your members so that they can have, every little bit helps when it comes down to those boards.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Rob Russell was sharing some information. This was actually a past president,
Okay.
and he served on Dr. Willard Smith, and he was I believe, the first Black president for for California Chiropractic
Oh, okay.
Association. He reportedly failed his boards exams.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
was prior to national board exams a few times, and he was quite
Mhm.
intelligent, but he was Black, and it was an open secret that he failed because some of the DCs administering the state licensing exam didn't want a Black man to be licensed as a DC. So he just was sharing
Mm.
that. So I don't know if that with Life West, I don't know if he was a Life West graduate. I don't know if Rob Russell know
Wow.
that, but where he graduated from.
Never heard that story, but that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think Dr. Smith just passed away last year,
Okay.
but Life
Hmm.
West knows him very well. They just gave him an award, I think, a year or two ago. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
uh, oh, he went to LACC. Okay, correction.
LACC. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The LACC.
Um, but anyways, just sharing that information. And then one more question from Dr. Gary McDowell. I've been in practice in San Diego for over 30 years, and the majority of my patients are white and have been exposed to chiropractic. Would you correlate this as to why there may also be more white doctors of chiropractic?
Correlating that her practice is more is totally inclusive of white patients.
I think it's just more, he's trying to say maybe the white
Oh, his
population is more exposed to chiropractic, and so
yeah.
that's why there's more white doctors versus.
I could agree with that. They are exposed a lot more. One of the conversations that I've had in the last 30 days with other professional leaders of organizations in the profession is that we have an issue where we truly are. I mean, it truly is a word of mouth profession, meaning like if you're good at what you do, like people are going to come. So that's the first thing. We also know that, again, as I stated in the presentation, that of course, people tend to gravitate to people that most resemble them. They look like them. And so if we are not necessarily promoting the profession or marketing the profession as a whole, then we pretty much are, slim pickings when it comes down to how the profession is presented to a certain population, right? So I would say that most of the people who have practices that are non-diverse, that have a non-diverse pool of patients, it probably is because that community does a very good job of exposing the population to what chiropractic is, or the chiropractor is just that good, right? Because everybody then words of mouth. And then of course, if I am, in a huge African-American family and I'm excited about the chiropractor that I just saw, it's easy for me to go and call my aunt and my uncle, and then they're going to call their friends, and then they're going to call their friends. And before you know it, your practice is built based off of word alone, but not necessarily because you got into, the community and presented the profession. So I think in order to move up into the next level, the profession will definitely have to take a look at how we are marketing the profession as a whole. Number one, we'll have to stop bickering amongst ourselves and even determine what a true definition of what chiropractic is, so that we can create some marketing and move into the new millennia and get us a commercial, get us on some billboards, do some radio ads that basically just explains what chiropractic is, so that people in all of these communities can see different faces, different doctors, different gamuts of practice that we all offer, and they can make a very educated, decision on who they want to go to and where they want to get their chiropractic care from. So I really do believe in answering the question. Yes, it does have a lot to do with the marketing and exposure to the profession. But the Black community, literally, we're all stuck in a clinic. So if you don't know about the clinic and you haven't heard word of mouth, it's almost inevitable that you don't know what chiropractic is. I personally did not know what chiropractic was until I was an undergraduate graduate. I mean, like, it was crazy. I went to a friend of mine's house, and her husband was a Tri-9 at Parker, and he was studying, and I saw his table, and that's the only way I learned. I asked a question, he put me on the table, gave me an adjustment, and I had allergies that completely went away, and it was just crazy. And I was like, why didn't I know about this? I would have been trying to go to school to do this. So there's a lot of, people that just don't know what chiropractic is. And again, I think we have to do much better as a profession as a whole to promote our profession so that the masses just understands that we are here and what we do and how they can benefit from it.
That was great. Okay, so this is just the last comment from Dr. Julie. Thank you so much for this eye-opening information. A great reminder that our work is ongoing to achieve and maintain balance.
Absolutely. Well, I have had, you know, it's been great to be here and speak with you guys. I just, you know, I think you guys have the notes with all of the references if you'd like to, you know, read up on some of the things that I researched to make this presentation. But thank you to CalChiro for having me. I have enjoyed it, and I hope you all have learned something. And again, we'll join, you know, the talks in your communities, in your organizations, at your schools about diversity and inclusion so that we can make an impact and change our profession for the better. Thank you.